Welcome to the Thyroidless Life podcast with me, Dr. Rebecca Warren. This podcast is for you if you're healing after thyroidectomy, or you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, or think you might have a thyroid disorder, and want to understand what it looks like to truly get yourself well. Quite frankly, I wanted to share all the information that I wish I knew a decade and a half ago when I was diagnosed with a thyroid issue, had my thyroid cut out, had high dose radiation, and left there feeling worse than before. And that's why I made this podcast, so I can share that information with you. So you can take that information, implement it, and truly get yourself well starting today. All right, let's jump right in and talk about the gallbladder connection with our hormones. I will never forget how my thyroid journey began. And it began at 16 years old, walking out of a movie theater. I've shared my story in the first episode of this podcast series. But I literally can still remember how I felt. I can remember what I saw. It is still ingrained in my memory. And there's a lot of blurry things during that time that I don't remember. But I do specifically remember walking out of the movie theater and having an unbelievable amount of pain. Like, I thought at 16 I was having a heart attack. That's how bad it was. I could not do anything to help with the pain, and I was so scared. I was rushed to the emergency room to find out that I had gallstones, right? I had a lot of gallstones. The doctor said it looked like thousands of little stones in my gallbladder. And, when my parents came, the way it was talked about, it was like, well, it's okay because we can get this taken care of, right? Back then and even now, the answer is always the same. Whether you have gallstones, whether you're having a gallbladder attack, whether there's gallbladder congestion, the answer is always the same. No worries. We can cut out your gallbladder and you will be fine. It's not necessary. And even then at 16 years old with literally no knowledge, understanding, I don't know if I even knew where the gallbladder was. Something didn't sit right with me. That made no sense to me. If I didn't need the gallbladder, I wouldn't have been born with it. But also, how do I get a gallbladder attack? There was no explanation as to how this happens, what it means, how it could be avoided. And 3 years later is when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. I know for a fact. I don't have the testing. I don't have labs because no one dug deeper as to why a 16-year-old had a gallbladder attack. But I know without a doubt that I was having thyroid issues at that point. And when I talk about the gallbladder symptoms, like having, whether it's like you're having you're not releasing enough bile, or you're having stones, or you're having gallbladder attacks, all of those, I teach those as tip of the iceberg symptoms, meaning, you see the tip of the iceberg and it just doesn't look that bad, especially when our medical system says, hey, it's no big deal. You have a problem. We can cut out this organ. It's whatever. But what is underneath the surface is much, much bigger, much, much greater. And you have to understand that it's happening. The problem is not the gallbladder. The gallbladder is telling you, and for some of you guys, it was yelling at you, or it's yelling at you right now. It is yelling at you that something is wrong and it is dysfunctional because you have a bigger dysregulation in your body. And we miss it. We miss that, which ends up creating a lot more downward dysfunction and disease and symptoms for us. And we just had no idea. You might not have an idea that it's all connected. And that's so vitally important to understand, that the gallbladder is necessary. You need it. And I'm going to explain why. But not only that, if it becomes dysfunctional, listen, I love supplements. I'm going to share some herbs and some things that can help with the gallbladder and all of that. I know there's cleanses out there, but that's not what I'm talking about here, because you're not going to out supplement and you're not going to out cleanse a dysregulation in your body, especially when it's hormone related, right? You're going to keep on having to do cleanses over and over again. And it's just not going to work. You're still going to have the problem there because it is a symptom of a bigger issue. One of the biggest, experiences that I've had with coaching someone, I will never forget, was a woman in our office, a great practice member, love their family. We would work with them for years. But years ago, she came in and was having gallbladder attacks over and over and over again. We're talking about over 2 years of, if she wasn't having gallbladder attacks, she felt like she was having gallbladder issues. She felt like something like she was so scared to eat fat, and she was kind of nervous to eat protein because she didn't want to create a gallbladder attack. And so she went online and she found this gallbladder person that does all these cleanses and cleaning out of the gallbladder. And great, she did all this stuff, but it would still come back. And when I sat down with her, I looked at her whole health history, and I noticed again that it was cyclical. She didn't notice it was cyclical, but I was like, wait a minute, if it keeps coming back, let's look into this deeper. I did a full, what I consider, wellness panel. If you guys want to know what that is, I'll put a link. I talk about it a lot, about my wellness panel. I have an ebook on this. I'll put that in the show notes. Anyways, I did a full wellness panel, so I knew it wasn't her thyroid, but I was like, this is cyclical, right? And we went in and we tested her estrogen. Because of the symptoms around her menstrual cycle and because of how high her estrogen was, I had to explain to her, I know you did all these cleanses. I know you did all this stuff to get all these stones out, but it's your estrogen dominance that's giving you gallbladder attacks. Which, when you have a gallbladder issue and like a doctor's now telling you it's a hormone issue and you've never heard of that before, it's going to be like really shocking. Like, really? That's connected? But it is, and it was. And we were able to start clearing out her estrogen, helping her liver detox, rebalancing what was going on with her hormones. And they left. They never came back. And I'll never forget her sending me a picture of like the first time she ate, like she could eat meat without being scared, and it was like a big piece of lamb. That's huge. You have to understand that your gallbladder has, especially the sphincter of your gallbladder, has all these receptors for thyroid hormones. It also, like, your gallbladder has all these receptors for estrogen and progesterone, which is why if you look, what are kind of like the risk factors for being more prone to gallbladder attacks or gallstones, you're going to see that it's a woman, right? Like, that tends to happen more with females. But now that's shifting, because guess what? Men are having estrogen dominance issues too. They're having an estrogen, problem. So men can be more prone to those gallbladder attacks as well. So you have to understand that. Because if you go in and you get your gallbladder cut out and that's still there, well, okay, now you got rid of this tip of the iceberg. The iceberg is still underneath the water and you're crashing right into it, right? You've got to understand what to look for and like how to do that testing. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about. But let's go ahead and kind of break down this connection, how it's kind of connected, what some symptoms can be if you're having a gallbladder issue that's related to your hormones. So number one, I want to explain how like that gallbladder and thyroid connection, liver, gallbladder, and then thyroid connection works, right? And I also want to, let me take a second right now and talk about why there's this idea that you don't need the gallbladder, right? So first, let's talk about with the liver. The liver is where bile is made. Not only bile, it's where cholesterol is made. It's where thyroid hormones are activated and converted into its most active form. It's where vitamin D is processed. The liver is huge and very, very important. It filters the blood to get nutrients from the gut to everywhere else that your body needs it. Of course, a detox organ, filtering out chemicals and drugs that you may have been exposed to. It's really, really important. But yes, the liver is what makes bile. But when it makes the bile, in order to have that bile concentrated enough to break down the fat that you're consuming or the fat that needs to be broken down, it needs to fill up the gallbladder. Now, the gallbladder is this hollow-shaped organ, kind of looks like a pear, really, really small, and it's flat until it's filled up with bile. And the biggest function of the gallbladder is to store and concentrate that bile. What does that mean? Let's say when you're eating like a fatty meal, the bile is going to be concentrated and you're going to have the amount of bile appropriate to break down that fatty meal. But let me go ahead and tell you this. The bile isn't just important with breaking down your food and digesting it and absorbing it. Bile is vitally important in detoxing estrogen and eliminating your hormones like that you need to clear out of your body, right? Because they are made of fat, right? Not only that, but bile is essential, adequate amount of bile is essential to help break down and utilize fat-soluble vitamins. And what are those fat-soluble vitamins? Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. Holy moly, how many of you guys are out there on supplements for vitamin D because your levels are low? And hopefully, if you're supplementing, you're testing yourself. But I've had people that will use vitamin D and they'll take high amounts of it and they're not getting very, very high with their vitamin D levels whatsoever. If you do not have bile to break down and synthesize that fat soluble, that fat vitamin D, you're going to have deficiencies. Vitamin A, which affects the health of our skin, our vision. How many of you guys are noticing that your vision's getting worse? Oh, it's just old age. When you've been having gallbladder issues, or you've had your gallbladder removed, or having difficulty seeing at night. Vitamin K for clotting and our blood health, guys. These things, these vitamin A, D, E, and K, a potent antioxidant to protect your body at a cellular level. You want to know how to, women have good fertility. You want to know how to prevent cancer, right? You want to work with really powerful antioxidants, and vitamin E helps in that process in protecting you at a cellular level. You need adequate amounts of bile for that. You need adequate amounts of bile to break down and detox things. We know that toxins will join to fat to be eliminated out of your body. The proper amount of bile production and the proper concentration of bile is necessary for these life-altering systems to work. Like, for these processes to work, you need adequate bile. So what happens if you do get your gallbladder cut out? So the idea is that, it's not essential, like you don't need it. So what ends up happening is, instead of having this concentrated sac that's going to contract and release the appropriate amount of bile that you need for whatever your body is processing, you're just going to have this continuous trickle of bile. That's it. So now your gallbladder is removed, and now you have this continuous trickle of bile. The same amount all the time, no changes, because you're no longer having the mechanism there to hold on to it and to concentrate it. Which means that, you're more likely to see issues with fats, whether it's vitamins, whether it's nutrients, whether it's detoxification, whether it's eliminating and keeping your hormones, your steroid-based hormones in check, especially estrogen. That's a big deal. And you're probably thinking, Dr. Becca, oh crap, I don't have a gallbladder. Don't worry, I'm going to tell you what I think is one of the best ways to support yourself if you've had your gallbladder removed. But let's talk about kind of like that connection there with the thyroid and then the gallbladder. And then we'll talk about the connection there with estrogen and sex hormones when it comes to the gallbladder and the liver as well. That connection there. But, it not that it stinks. I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful how our body is so interconnected, even though we go to our doctors. Like, if you go within the medical system, you go see a GP and they're only going to, work with certain things, but you have to go see an endocrinologist to work with that thing. And if you have a gut issue, you got to go to a GI doctor and only work with that thing. And we forget how interconnected, how woven we are in all our different systems, right? Because the thing is, not only does the thyroid cause liver and gallbladder issues, but then the liver and the gallbladder will cause thyroid issues, right? So it's like this back and forth, this synergistic relationship, but which one, which one's causing the problem? No, they're both going to be interconnected, and the thyroid becomes dysfunctional. It's going to affect the liver and the gallbladder, but then when that gets dysfunctional, it makes your thyroid issues worse. So let's go ahead and talk about the fact that, when we're looking at active thyroid hormones, like that T3 that binds to the cell, it's involved in like the energy. I was about to go all sciencey down this deep road, but I was like, you know what, let me just keep it simple here because we want to talk about how to help that gallbladder situation, right? But it's energy. That's what you have to understand. It's energy for your cell. If you've ever gone hypothyroid, whether you have a thyroid or you had your thyroid removed, you feel tired, you feel fatigued. You could sleep for 10 hours and could still totally take a nap. But the thing is this, right? That's how you feel on the outside. That's a fraction of how fatigued your body is at a cellular level. You need energy at a cellular level to kind of push your body forward to allow every single system to function appropriately. So what does that mean? It means there's not a cell in the body that's not affected if you have too much T3 or too little. There's not a cell in the body that's not affected by that. It's all affected by that, and especially within your liver, right? You've got hypothyroid, all right? What we can see is that it'll affect your cholesterol production. We know in studies you can see higher levels of LDL production. If you're low in thyroid hormones, we know that. We can see that. And just a side note, I get questions all the time. Dr. Becca, and I've shared this before, does the thyroid T3, does it affect insulin? Does it affect leptin? Does it affect FSH? Does it affect estrogen output? Does it affect my adrenals? And the answer is yes, 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 yes. It affects all of that. It affects all of that. So we know that it affects like your liver. We know it affects your insulin sensitivity. It affects all of that. But when it comes down to the gallbladder, what we know is that you don't end up just randomly with stones. You have gallbladder dysfunction. There might be increased concentration of cholesterol that's more prone to making stones, or it could be that you're not fully releasing it. What we know is that when you have low T3, you can have that gallbladder that's filled up and not contracting effectively and efficiently to fully empty out. And what's left behind is sludge. What's left behind is bile that can then turn into stones. It's a dysfunctional pattern. And that's really important to understand. Okay, so I want to share something though, and I want to make sure that I'm clarifying that whether you're going hyper with your hormones or hypo with your hormones, both of them are going to cause dysregulation and increase your chances of not only having a dysfunctional gallbladder, but also creating gallstones, right? And if you don't have your thyroid, you've got to understand that if your medications are mismanaged, whether you're on too much or too little, you will experience this the same way, right? So there's a study, it's called Thyroid Dysfunction, either hyper or hypo promotes gallstone formation by different mechanisms. And I'll make sure to link it in the notes, show notes here. But what they found is they took some mice and they made some of them hyper. They made some of them hypo with their thyroid hormones and then kept some, normal within range. And then they fed them a diet that was more prone to create gallstones. And what they found is that in the group of mice that were hyperthyroid, 100% of them developed gallstones. In the group that was hypothyroid, 83% of them created gallstones. And then in the group that was, pretty normal thyroid hormones, it was 33%. And I think that's just crazy because, when I think about my own story, I think about, wow, like I wonder if someone would have just dug deeper, if I could have taken care of my thyroid issue before it had gotten so bad. And for a lot of you guys listening, you have experienced not having the right answers or not being diagnosed with a problem. For those of you that have had your thyroid removed, you're living through a process where you're not optimal with your hormones and you're having these symptoms with digestion in your gallbladder, and it's all connected, right? First of all, how amazing it is that our bodies will tell us that something's wrong, but understanding that we have to dig deeper and we have to ask the right questions because this isn't being talked about, right? Now, we know, again, it's going to cause those issues within the gallbladder. And I want to talk about too. So once we're having that gallbladder issue, we're not releasing, proper bile. there is a relationship between HCl production and bile. So let me go ahead and take a sidestep there, because one of the most common symptoms that gets also overlooked when it comes to having thyroid disorder is gut health, gut symptoms, right? Like acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea, skin issues, headaches. There's vaginal infections. There's a lot that's connected to the gut, right? Let's go ahead and take a step back here. We know proper HCl production is important too for signaling of bile and bile production and the gallbladder and all of that. But we also know that if your T3 isn't optimal, if your active thyroid hormone isn't optimal, then your HCl production isn't optimal. And then boom, another signaling issue going to your gallbladder and not allowing proper bile production. And so when you have that issue there, now you're also having other digestive issues going along. These symptoms are all connected to that underlying thyroid issue. And bile also helps keep inflammation in check. It helps modulate your whole entire gut system. You know how important the gut is, all going back to having suboptimal. Remember, when I say suboptimal, I'm not just talking about out of range, out of those medical ranges that you see on paper. I'm talking about you have a range and you're on the lower end of the range, or you're too high on the higher end of the range, and you're having symptoms. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about suboptimal. So really important. I also want to talk about let me give you a heads up. Like, how do you know if you do have some gallbladder issues? What are some symptoms that you might experience? Well, if you eat too much fat and you experience, let's go ahead and say this. If you're eating too much fat, or you have a really fatty meal and you notice that your stools are loose, or you notice that your stool are a different color, like a clay color or a light brown color, because bile affects the color of your stool. Another thing I think it's interesting to realize is that if you're eating fat and your body can't process it, you can get bloating and you can get gassiness. Now, that bloating and gassiness, a lot of people struggle with that, and they might think it's another thing like SIBO or, bacterial overgrowth, which it can be. But if it's happening after eating fat, then that's kind of like a big red flag. There's a bile issue there. So bloating, gas, having some stomach issues, especially after eating fat. That's a big one. If you're deficient in those fat soluble vitamins I talked about, big red flag. If you cannot get that vitamin D up, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, those are some really, really big ones. If you're having issues kind of rebalancing those sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, that can be a sign of a gallbladder issue. So where do you start? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys this. In the show notes, I put this quick, this really kind of quick guide ebook of what I talk about today. I'm going to put kind of these herbs that I'll talk about, things to be aware of in regards to symptoms, testing, all of that's going to be in the ebook. So make sure you go to the caption, click on the link right there, and you'll get your kind of gallbladder hormone connection ebook that you can kind of reference from this whole entire conversation, right? So, okay, going back, where do you start if you want to know if your gallbladder dysfunction is associated with some type of hormone issue? Ooh, before we go into that, I do got to talk about estrogen. Let me touch on estrogen because I'm going to tell you when you should test estrogen if you're a cycling woman or if you're in postmenopause, right? So estrogen dominance, right? Well, first of all, the gallbladder itself has receptors for both estrogen and progesterone. I think that's just incredible. And so when you have high estrogen because of estrogen dominance or birth control exposure or hormone replacement therapy, and they're at higher levels, they've been found to cause higher bile and cholesterol, like really concentrated, that concentrated cholesterol and bile that's going to be more prone to gallstones, super saturation of bile, guys. You're going to have a higher chance of having that bile be really sticky and difficult to eliminate from the gallbladder. And you're going to have a lower functioning gallbladder, meaning same thing with the thyroid. If you have all this estrogen binding to those receptors, a lot of this estrogen dominance, you're not fully emptying. That's a little hard to say. You're not fully emptying. There you go. You're not fully emptying that gallbladder. You're just a ticking time bomb for more stone production and eventual gallbladder attack. So if you think you have underlying, gallbladder issues, or you have underlying gallbladder issues, you can do some testing, right? Number one, got to get a full thyroid panel, not just TSH, not just T4, not just TSH and free T4. You have to get a full thyroid panel. Look at your TSH, which is your pituitary signaling. Look at free T4, free T3. Look at your antibodies. See, are they causing some issues there? TPO antibodies, thyroglobulin antibodies, and reverse T3. Very, very important to get the full panel, because if you go to your doctor and you're not having a conversation about fully examining what's happening with those thyroid hormones, you're going to get a TSH, just like I did when I was a patient, being told everything is fine when it actually is not fine. Now, if you are a cycling woman and you want to get progesterone and estrogen tested, it has to be done in your luteal phase. I'm so stinking tired of looking at blood work from OBGYNs, just testing estrogen and progesterone whenever. We know that the most optimal time to test these levels, because of how they kind of peak in that luteal phase, both of them, is going to be in your luteal phase, which is post-ovulation. Ideally, it's 5 to 7 days post-ovulation. So within that 5 to 7 day mark, kind of like a rough around would be day 19 to 21 of a 28-day cycle. And you're probably like, if you're not tracking or charting your fertility signs, or you don't know when you're ovulating, get, they're very cheap ovulation strips. They will confirm a positive ovulation, and then you can count 5 days from there and then go and get your blood work. If you're going to get blood work done, make sure it's accurate, right? Make sure that it is at the right time so you can get the right information you need. Now, if you're postmenopause, you can test whenever. And of course, look at that range, right? I like to kind of like a little crash course. It doesn't apply to everything, but if you're looking at lab ranges and you want to know, okay, like, where am I at? I don't want to just look at medical ranges. I kind of look at more functional ranges. Take where the halfway mark is within that range, and then that's kind of like your bottom part. So I was gonna try to give you an example. So let's say, like, okay, here we go. I didn't want to give myself too much of a difficult math issue here, math problem, on the spot. But anyway, so let's say your range is from like 10 to 100. So the full number is going to be 90, 10 minus that to get that halfway point. And then half of 90 is 45. So if you're like at 46, boom, right off the bat, you're already trending on the low end within a functional range. That's kind of just to give you an idea. You don't remember these medical ranges. What happens if you're out of these ranges? That's a severe issue. That's oh my gosh, this is bad now. It's been bad enough that it's this low. That's not what we want. We don't want to just get by. We want to be as optimal as possible. Start looking in those areas. Also, you can kind of know if you're having gallbladder issues and possibly estrogen issues. You can know with your symptoms. If you're cycling heavy, painful periods, heavy flow, clotting, cramping, longer days of bleed, even if your periods are irregular, none of that is normal. And they're going to be more prone to be associated with estrogen dominance issues. If a week before your period, you are feeling more anxious, depressed, down, feeling emotionally like not regulated well, that's not normal. That's not just PMS. That is a hormone issue. Now, if you're postmenopause, if you're having difficulties with sex, during sex, vaginal dryness, hot flashes, weight loss resistant, depression, anxiety. Ladies, I understand that a majority of the time you're told that these things are normal, and it's just a normal part of going through menopause. That is false. That's wrong. There is a problem. So if you're seeing all of that and you're having some gallbladder digestion issues, I want you to kind of look at that overall big picture. All right, let's go to some solutions as we wrap up today's show and today's episode. All right, like I said, I do bile pushes with my membership group, gallbladder cleanses. They have access to my protocols. What I want you to understand in this episode is, let's go ahead and get down to that root cause of the gallbladder dysfunction and support you through healing of that root cause, right? Because, it can take time for your thyroid hormones to be leveled and to be where they need to be, where it's no longer causing issues for your gallbladder, whether you don't have a thyroid or whether you do have a thyroid, right? And I acknowledge that. So there's things that you can do as you're working through that. But I think a really good thing is, if you do have your gallbladder, one way to really support kind of like that gallbladder function is to, number one, you can support it by adding in ox bile and bile salts. I'm going to put a link. It'll be in the ebook, and I'll put it in the show notes. A link. I have a shop where I create protocols of my favorite supplements that I know work, that I've had years of experience with, of the supplements that I love for different things. So I'll make a protocol for those that don't have a thyroid, and I will make a protocol for those that do. And you can access that. It'll say like my shop, my supplement shop, again, in the ebook, in the show notes. And we do a lot of sales on there. So if right now you're like, oh, I don't know if I can buy this, stick around. We're probably going to have a sale here in a couple of weeks, maybe even next week. I don't even know where we're at. But we always want to make sure that you have the best supplements that work, that really is going to help move that dial and move you forward. But going back, so ox bile, like bile salts, HCl, digestive enzymes, especially utilizing things like lipase, is very beneficial. And so those type of supplements that I just talked about, if you do not have a gallbladder, you should be on. I take a really good kind of mixture of digestive enzymes and ox bile to support my meals, because I do not have a gallbladder, right? I do that, and especially if I'm detoxing, I will utilize that type of supplementation. Now, I want you to understand that that group of supplements, the point is to help with the breaking down of the fat that your body is trying to process, right? Now, for these other ones that I'm about to mention, can be really helpful in kind of thinning out your bile and helping and supporting what's happening inside the gallbladder, right? So choline and ginger extract, taurine, phosphatidylcholine, dandelion root, milk thistle are really great. Also, green tea and coffee are really good in kind of, if you can drink coffee, if you can have caffeine, because a lot of you guys might have some adrenal issues. For the time being, you might have to stay away from it, but those are things that can be really good at helping to thin out the gallbladder. Now, I got to talk about some lifestyle stuff, right? Because we don't take into consideration when we eat. And when I teach on nutrition, especially when I go over it in my membership group or when I talk to my coaching clients about this, we forget how powerful our environment is in our body's ability to digest and to break things down. I want to explain something, that if you're in a stressful environment, your body's going to understand that, and it's going to function from a place of survival, right? You're going to be more in a sympathetic state. And so the purpose of meals, right? Meals should be a moment where you slow the heck down. Slow down, eliminate stressors. Having the news on in the background, well, CNN, Fox, whatever, while you're eating your meal, as you're downloading all these negative messaging, is not going to be conducive in proper digestion of your nutrients. It's not. You're downloading messages that the world is not safe, that you are not well, arguing, having heated, the environment in which you eat in is vitally important, right? Vitally, vitally, vitally important. So eating in your car, eating on the go, you're not going to, I get life is crazy. You're eating fast. You will not absorb nutrients. Not only that, are you not going to absorb them as efficiently, but the output from bile and the pancreas and with insulin and digestive enzymes is not going to be optimal. You're going to down regulate that. So as much as you can, using your meals as a time to slow down and to get away from technology and reconnect with your loved ones, or sit alone, read a book, just be calm, because digestion doesn't start once the food hits your gut. It starts from your brain signaling in your mouth and then from top down, right? So the signaling is going to be really important in your brain and your nervous system. And that signaling is what's going to tell the bile to produce, to release the, like I said, pancreatic enzymes and insulin. Another thing that can be really helpful, and just be aware of this, you might have some extra gut issues that affect your digestion and might not be like great if you did this. And if you do this and you have symptoms, take a step back and then you have to look at your gut and see what's going on there. But taking in some apple cider vinegar. Most of the people I work with can use it before a meal. If you cannot, then we know there's a chronic gut stomach acid issue that needs to be addressed. It can be H. pylori, it can be something else. Be aware of that. If you cannot take apple cider vinegar before a meal, hey, it's time to go look deeper into the gut, look and see if you have some type of gut infections, doing like a good stool test. There's information about stool testing on my website, Dr. Rebecca Warren, under testing. But apple cider vinegar before a meal, 1 to 2 ounces, it helps stimulate that HCl production, and it's a good way to help start breaking down the food. And HCl production, remember, also creates the bile production, right? That signaling for bile. So doing HCl before a meal and doing bitters after a meal can be really good and supportive in helping digestion. You can use bitter greens in your meals, like if you're making a salad, throwing in some bitter greens, or there are some bitter tinctures that will help digest your food and help with the digestion process and signaling. Next thing is 2 things that you can do while you're eating. Number 1, not drink water. Don't get mad at me. I have some people that are like, are you stinking kidding me, Dr. Rebecca? Yeah, you don't want to dilute the HCl. Focus on if you're going to drink. First of all, if you can't have a meal without drinking, then we need to take a look at your overall water saturation, water intake, and mineral intake throughout the day. First of all, okay? It's only during that meal. Just focus on eating the meal, consuming that meal without taking in all this water to dilute things, right? So I recommend just wait till after you're done eating to drink water, or do it before. But as you're eating, just eat your food without having to drink a lot of liquid while you're eating that, and chewing. Y'all, if you're not thinking about this, if you're not actively aware of this, you might not realize that you don't chew your food thoroughly. And listen, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm Hispanic, 1 of 4. Like, I grew up like eating fast was normal. I'll never forget when my husband, Dr. Nathan, first visited my home and he was around the table, and he had read about this years prior. We were in school to be doctors of chiropractic, and he had read about it. So he already was a slow eater, but he also knew the importance of chewing. And so we all ate. There's like 6 of us, and then or more than 6 of us because spouses, and he was just still sitting there. We were all in the living room, and he was just still enjoying his food. But he had it right. Number 1, the act of chewing, the act of masticating, again, is it's a process of digestion. And doing that not only prepares the food for when it does go to where it goes to be broken down, but it also creates that signaling that you need to tell everything in the digestive process below it to get ready. And if you are eating, taking a couple bites, not fully chewing your food, and you're swallowing it, you are making it harder on your digestive tract, both in signaling and the ability to break it down more efficiently. So the idea is you chew it enough to the point where you don't recognize it. I'm going to be real with you. I don't do that way, but that's the most optimal way. But you have to be able to chew it enough, right? You want to chew it to the point where, okay, this is mush now, and then you can swallow it. That's going to be a vital part of digestion. So guys, this is a lot of information, but I think the biggest things I hope you take away from this is that if you don't have a gallbladder, you need to retrain your thinking and realize that your gallbladder was necessary. Just because it was easier than a lot of other dysfunctions to get taken care of doesn't mean it wasn't important. It is important, and you need to support that if you don't have it. You also need to understand that just because you had your gallbladder removed doesn't mean the problem was ever corrected. You still might have that hypo or hyperthyroidism or thyroid balance. You might still have that sex hormone issue that still has to be addressed, right? And if you still have that gallbladder, hey, it's time to support it, save it, keep it, and work on understanding what's causing that issue so you can take that major stressor off of that gallbladder. Make sure to check the notes. I'm going to put all those links and references down there. And let me know what you guys think about this show. If you loved it, please leave a review. Let me know where you're listening from. And I will probably be having a thyroid Q&A here in the next couple of episodes. So make sure you're in my newsletter, because that's where I ask what questions, what topics do you want me to touch on next? And I want to hear that from you. So make sure you join my newsletter, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, guys, thanks for tuning into today's episode. I'm going to take a few seconds here and answer some frequently asked questions I get asked when people find my podcast or if they find me on social media. And it might be a question that you have as well. But before I jump into that, I'm going to ask a favor. If you enjoyed today's episode, or if this podcast has been helpful to you, I'm going to ask that you leave a review. I love being able to see how this is helping you on your health journey. And by leaving a review, you help me be able to reach more people with this message. And if you subscribe, you also have the chance to have these episodes automatically downloaded so you don't miss any future episodes that go live. All right, let's jump into this question. The first question I always get asked is, Dr. Rebecca, how do I work with you? Well, I'm excited to tell you guys about my amazing program. It's the Thyroid Inner Circle membership. I love this program. I love this membership. It was a dream I had for so long about creating a space and a community where women can come together and learn how to take their health back into their own hands, how to heal themselves, not just the thyroid. We go over hormones and adrenals and gut health and detox. And every single month, there's 2 different sessions. One session is focused on me teaching you about whatever the group is focused on doing health-wise. And then we do a Q&A session, whether that's about the topic or about anything at all, like how do I read my labs? But to find out more information about that membership group, go to thyroidinnercircle.com, and there you can find out how to sign up for it, what it looks like to be a part of that amazing program. The second thing I get asked is, where do I start? Now, where you start is, have you done a complete wellness panel? If you go to my website, drrebeccawarren.com, you'll see a free Optimal Thyroid Lab ebook. What you'll notice is in that ebook, I don't describe just what thyroid labs to get done. I go over a full wellness panel that I do on myself, that I've done on women I work with throughout the years. It's so important to get your labs done, the right labs, and understand what's going on there. That's the first place to start. And the last question I want to touch on, it's usually from people that are living without a thyroid and just want more information on what that's like. Now, if you go to Facebook, I do have a free group there on Facebook. It's Healing After Thyroidectomy, where people are either going through that, living without it, and it's a great community where I pop in. So that's the Healing After Thyroidectomy group on Facebook. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you